Good choice.
Huh? Time to pull it out.
You could probably go now.
I glance everybody up.
Just a second.
Stop by.
Okay.
I won't go faster.
Why not?
I invent the rules. Yeah, that was.
That's right, you did, and I apologize.
Don't think.
In the middle
Oh,
of-
about
Within a minute, you can't get it close.
It's just. They'll take. You gotta sit there and like wait, like, you know, for that one.
No, you just pick one.
Change it if it wasn't going to be.
The garage is attached.
I know.
It's like, you know, that requires a certain number of blocks of elevation of foundations. In between that and yes, it's on the code talks about kind of sloping the ground. Away from structures, they do end up. So they'll really ask. Some.
All right, 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We all rise to do the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
John Leo. Here. Jamie Melky.
Here.
Matt Bogira.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
John Cups is absent, but we do have a quorum.
Okay. It's time for citizens' comment. If you have something you'd like to address us about that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. No?
You're lucky.
Hmm?
You're lucky tonight.
Yeah. All
I do
right.
have a question.
Yeah.
Jennifer Blancato, 531 West Summit. I don't know to whom to direct this, so I'll ask and then find it out. The crosswalks in town, those that need to be repainted, who takes care of that?
We contract with someone to do that, and Lucas, I don't know if you know when they're coming in, they usually come in May to
I
do
just
that.
paid the bill, so that will be soon. I just put a deposit down.
So it'll probably be in May sometime.
Okay. And then who makes those decisions on, is it Lucas? Is it?
DPW usually, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So if you have a question, just let me know. Sorry about that.
IT guy.
I just wasn't charged.
All right. Guess if there's no other citizens' comment. Oh,
Rick Tarczynski, 465 State Street. I don't think I've seen anything, and I was just wondering where we stand on the playground down on the waterfront. Is that still scheduled to start beginning of May, or And which location is it gonna be?
I can update that. So we are looking at putting it back in its original location on the sand with a accessible surface as well as some improvements there, so it's safe. We are working with the playground designer to get us a final design and cost estimate, so we can provide that to the group that said they would donate to put it back there. So then we'll know more probably in a week or two.
Okay, thank you.
Good. I guess onto the consent agenda, we need to add the Chamber of Commerce's events.
Yep, I neglected to put that in the packet, but we do have several events from the chamber, and I uploaded those to the website today, and they're annual events that occur every year. So staff reviewed them already. I think Rachel shared them with the department heads, and they have no problem with them, so.
Okay. And some citizens comment on the consent agenda? Excellent. Comments from the board?
No, I was fine with it. Barring any other changes, I would make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Matt Bulgara,
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
So, move on to the manager section.
Okay, so let me just take my screen down a little bit. All right, and I just a reminder out there, because I know we have a lot of topics on the agenda, so that for those that do have comments, we do have a 3-minute rule for each agenda item, so try to stick to that 3 minutes, and that'll help things go along. And for those that are online, the mayor will call the people in the audience and that are here physically first, and then we'll go to those on Zoom. All right. First agenda item is a farmer's presentation by the farmer's market. Hannah Bianchi is here to go over their operations this year. They're starting on May 27th and going through October 21st.
October 14th.
October 14th, all right, well, October 14th, and and then Wednesday markets start on May 31st. So they're continuing to request their basic city services, such as storing their red sawhorses and no parking tripod signs behind the New York restaurant, the public parking lot, as well as the Zorn Park outlet, and they're also looking for a garbage receptacle to be located in Zorn Park this year, so.
There's a couple of things, yeah.
Yeah, so Hannah will take over as the presentation, but after presentation, some council to review and discuss, and then, approve the event and ask questions or any modifications if necessary. So Hannah, I will put your presentation on, but I will press play.
You don't have to press play for it yet.
Okay, all right.
Or sure, I mean, I just have it starts with a little video, just general information.
Whenever
about
you
the
want me
market.
to.
Go for it.
Okay.
Listen to it. I can press the button also. Switch screens. Just a little overview. So while he's getting the next slide up, I know most of your faces, but I am Hannah Bianchi and I run the Harbor Springs Farmers Market. I started vending at this market when I was like 11 or 12 and took over running it in October of 2019. So I have been with the organization for quite a long time. Just a little brief overview. We had Michigan Farmers Market Association last summer came and did a rapid market assessment in August. They did a couple things. They did some customer counts. They had a rapid market, or they had a dot survey, and then went around with their clipboards for the whole market. There's actually a 15-page report that you can find on our website. They had a whole bunch of notes and such. For the survey, there's some information here that I'll share a little bit more. For customer counts, we rope off the entire market, and we have 3 designated entrances, and they tally the second 20 minutes of every hour. And then with their equation, this particular day, August 6th, they counted about 2,500 people attending the market, and that's just adults. We had about 500 kids, but they only count the paying adults. So with the dot survey, 66% of the people that attended the market that day came downtown specifically to visit the farmers market. So that's with the 2,500 people, that's 1,500 people, additional people downtown there specifically to attend the farmers market. The average people in shopping party was 2.3. The average amount spent at the farmers market was $33, and then the average amount spent at downtown local area businesses was $30. So then I have the little equation of out of the 2,500 people divided by the shopping party multiplied by how much, that's approximately $32,000 spent downtown that day. Not at the market, but at downtown businesses because of the farmers market. We have, and that particular day, there was no special events. We didn't have anything going on special at market. There was nothing happening downtown. It wasn't the 4th of July. We did a customer count July 15th, which was Kids Day, that we had nearly 5,000 people that day, 3,800 adults and almost 700 kids. So this was a very average normal day. So multiplying that by 5 markets as approximately $1 million spent at downtown local businesses because of the farmers market. So it very much impacts not just us, not just the vendors benefit, not just the customers benefit. It is really a community event that the entire community benefits from the market. All of this information plus all of the survey questions is all on our website. So we can go to the next slide, please. A little reason why I'm going to be asking for some of the things I'm asking for. Between all of our additional programming, I have 8 tents, who knows how many tables, so many bins and lots of stuff that has to get set up every single day, broken down every single day and hauled around all sorts of places. So we're actually in the process. I'm going down tomorrow to look for a working vehicle, not this one anymore, a cargo van that everything will be stored in. But you can go to the next slide. We have additional items stored in the alley behind the New York, the parking spot right next to the dumpsters. That last year I did have special permission to park the truck here permanently, as it was not a safe vehicle to be driving back and forth to my house. But that should be resolved, but we are looking at getting another structure put here for storage. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 things overall that I'm hoping to get approved. Added trash and recycling receptacles, a raised garden bed for the kids station, a shed in the alley, and then possibly an added bike rack in Zorn Park. So I'll go into further detail with each of these. This is the big one. So drawing in the corner, this is not an exact mock-up of what we will be doing. This is just one that I found that has the exact measurements. I measured the spot. It does go, if you've done, it angles a little bit in, so it'll be a little bit tighter on the very, very back end than here. I've talked to Brad Reed with Harbor Springs Wood Shop, so they are willing to build it. And rather than double doors, we were looking at getting a garage door style. So when the doors open, we don't hit $100,000 car in the parking spot next to us. So we will stay in our own zone. And this will allow those red barricades, the no parking signs to be stored in there during the season. Harbor Springs, we would give a copy of the key to the city, a copy of the key to the police department, since they are amazing, and put the signs out the day before. It's just a way to make everything look a little tidier. Plus then picnic table, and there's some other things in the off season that could get stored in there as well, so they're not all over the place. My main question with this is not just the building of it, but I don't know if there are any specific, obviously I'm not going to paint it hot pink or anything, but if there are any specific design requirements or anything with the city, with the possibility of a shed.
We don't have anything specific because we normally don't deal with this on city property. So it's really at this point, something what, council and the community would think is best appropriate for that spot, or most appropriate for that spot. It has been, several comments about how it's, looked a little chaotic, with things in the past. So this would definitely be a big improvement. But really, that's up to council to decide if that's something you want to see back there, take up a parking space, and what you want it to look like.
Okay, so let's go through the presentation.
If you want to go through the entire
Yep, I'll go
presentation.
through all the- This is all the shed information I have. You can go to the next slide. I'll go through all of them. Number 1, a suggestion and point with the rapid market assessment was trash. So there's 1 garbage can at the very front of Market, right in front of Johann's. There's 1 in front of the ice cream shop, and that is it. So I was hoping to possibly get 1 put in Zorn Park. There is 1 there just for like that week of 4th of July. That works really well. But what I was hoping is that one put there that I could then roll into the center of Market and have an actual trash can in Market. I would roll it back and do all that to get it taken care of. And then same thing with recycling. There are already quite a few of those bins in the back alley. I don't know if I could just borrow 1, same thing, roll it out, roll it back after Market, or if I would have to talk to Emmett County Recycling to get an additional bin. But same thing, it would still have to be stored there because they would have to pick up the recycling. Next slide. This is one that I don't feel particularly passionate about, but in the rapid market assessment, they noticed that there are bike is a very, very popular way of getting around in our city. And it gets slightly chaotic at the end of the market. This is more a question for you, Chief Knightley. Is this their problem was, oh, there's no bike rack for people to lock their belongings up because they might get stolen. And I'm like, oh, you clearly have never been to Harbor Springs before. I don't find this an issue, but if it is an issue, obviously I'm gonna address it.
There's a lot of bikes down there. The only problem with the bike rack, they have to replace the grass, which is not necessarily conducive to placing bikes on a bike rack.
Oh, they are, I mean, half of them are
Yeah.
further down are tipped over, so.
So that would be the inconvenience for the DPW. I feel to mow around it, so that, I don't know.
Well, they don't stay there for very long,
I
and
agree.
mowing, I guess, they're usually fairly good about, if they do mow, they come up either really early, or they're usually just not there during market hours.
Yeah, I'm just saying that mowing in the off, have to move that bike rack all the time.
Oh, the bike rack,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, not the bike.
So like I said, this was just one that this was the main our main note of Myth Month. I don't feel passionate about this one, but
Well, I'll do some work on it, just to see.
okay, thank you. Last one. And then kids programs, we have very much grown over the past couple of years. And I was hoping to get 2 raised garden beds that would equal 2 by 8 feet to put behind the kids booth to have like an active kids garden. I've already talked to the ladies at Johans and they are willing to water on not Wednesdays and Saturdays. And these would be removed in the winter, hopefully put in the shed if we have it, or put somewhere not on the sidewalk in the winter time. And that is it. Yeah, this is the big one.
I guess any public comment before we start our discussion on any of this? No, Ed?
There's somebody.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Till Wayland, 5244. I just, I'm amazed at the creativity of this whole presentation. I never
Thank you.
really thought about doing anything any different with the farmer's market, but I can
Always
see that
things that can be
you
done
can,
differently.
there can be a lot of improvements that
Thank
will
you.
benefit many people. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do any of the merchants around have any problem with putting that shed back at the end of the alley?
We don't know yet. But good
We
point.
do know that we have lots of people that had issues with the way it was.
Right.
So I had that truck that was not the nicest looking truck in the world, parked there from May through October. I would drive my own vehicle down, but then the truck would always be parked there. So really it was just a yucky looking shed. On wheels.
Anyone else? No? I guess I'm kind of the key player with the alley behind the New York. I think this would be a vast improvement. I don't know about how it would work with the city in the winter time as a year-round structure, because that's where they pile up all the snow in the alley. And so you lose a parking
You
place.
lose 2 spots.
2 spots, 2 to 3 spots in the winter time, so that's an issue. It's a vast improvement over the old truck.
And the idea would be that everything would be stored in it. There wouldn't be anything stacked around it.
Correct. The
Everything
red
would be inside.
barricades and the no parking signs would live inside of that. So that would be the only,
Mhm.
that's all you would see,
Right.
which is why a key would be provided to the police department.
Just in the back of that alley, you can't park cars there or anything else, because you got trash and all the garbage people have to come in to use it, so you're not really losing parking spaces or anything.
There's
There's
7 or 8
six.
spots.
You're not losing all,
No, just
1 or 2.
1 in the summertime and 2 to 3 in the winter time.
Is there anywhere else to store it? I mean, when I
We
saw
used
your
to.
pictures, is there
We
anywhere?
used to store right behind behind Johans, but that's way like completely really out in the open. So several years ago, we got enough complaints of it there that then the solution was the alley. And to answer your question, no, there's really not.
Have you, and I don't know if it's appropriate to store them inside anywhere, but like the basement of the churches, or I just was trying to think of somewhere else when I was looking at your presentation. And where else could it be? I struggle a little bit with the year round when the market runs from, June to October. That's just one of my hesitations.
Questions?
I understand, but
Could the shed be moved as well in the winter time, or? is it
Yeah.
hard to-
no, not really. I mean, not without a large and very much a large amount of hassle, but
What if it was built on a trailer, so it could be moved? It could be built on wheels like some of the small houses and things, and it could be moved somewhere else.
it is possible. Somebody want to donate a trailer?
Or they could just be, the trailer could be built right, it could be built right on a trailer with the trailer. It could be a girder.
That's a whole nother, yes, I hear you. That's a whole nother expense that I would have to take into consideration.
They'll say the one issue with that, we're the ones that move the signs all the
Yeah.
time. And it takes one officer, usually a half an hour to 45 minutes. And if you elevate that trailer to try to get Tyler Swift to try to climb into that trailer to move those signs is gonna be very difficult. It's gonna be difficult enough in a shed. If you take it a 90-degree day that these officers with bulletproof vests and they're 30-pound, they're moving these signs. So I'm glad to see they would be inside, but it's still gonna be an issue. And it just, when we talked about behind Johans, because they used to be behind Johans and they were stored right along the wall. It was easier for us because it was much, I mean, now we have to truck all the way down the alley to get them. But the problem with behind Johans is that they weren't getting mowed because those signs were there and then the grass was growing up in the signs and it looked very ugly. And we had multiple complaints about them there.
Has this been run by Lucas at all?
Yeah, Lucas is online. Lucas, if you can add your comments.
I was just wondering if,
Yeah.
if he had weighed in or not, particularly because of the comment about snow in the winter. But I believe, I mean, something that small can be moved with a forklift. I mean, there are much larger structures that are delivered to your backyard. So I don't think moving it, and I like the idea, let it be there when it's needed, and then it could be moved probably to a number of other city locations when it's not being used. Probably needs a forklift.
Lucas, do you want to talk to both of those points? One, to storing it there year round with the snow storage or snow piling that we do there, as well as any other areas in the city that it could be moved to during the winter time?
Yeah, I think John is right there as opposed to doing something, building with a trailer. I think a better option would just have it on heavy skids with a couple of pockets for a forklift to pick it up or a front end loader. We could do that and then just temporarily place it on a trailer to be relocated someplace else. I think that would be a better option than trying to incorporate a trailer, just like Kyle had said. It'd be more elevated and it would be quite costly to try to do something like that. Snow removal, that is where we push the snow. So that, of course, would take up some space. Also, removing snow isn't necessarily the most gentle thing sometimes. So it's not like we can stack snow up against the shed. So we have to keep the snow then away from the shed. So yes, we potentially would be taking up more area.
Lucas, are there any other spots in the city, on city property you think could store it? Or Hannah, is there any spots of people in your market by you that could store the shed in the wintertime?
It's possible, it's just getting it there.
Well, isn't there room up by the DPW? I mean, you just stick it in a corner, it's not gonna get used during the winter
Or at the stadium, I mean.
or at the stadium or back here. I
It could
mean,
be outside.
once it's in place for the
Very
winter,
much can be
Not gonna
outside,
go
yes.
you don't even need access.
I don't need it. Would not
But
need
that
it.
might be something that Lucas
And they
can
don't,
optimize.
they of course would be able to be in there, but the barricades and the red signs aren't stored there in the winter anytime anyway. I would be able to put, if we get the garden beds, that blue picnic table that is now up against the wall, and that could go in there. There's things that we don't have to look at all winter.
I have a question about the cost. Who is paying? The
I am.
markets are.
Yep,
the
I
markets
did a lot of
involved?
fundraising to try to get this done,
Okay,
but I don't have
yeah.
all
no,
of the
that's
money.
okay. I just didn't know what you'd asked. I
Yes,
wasn't
that,
sure
we would be covering the cost.
So the contribution from the city would be moving it out of the way and then back again in the
If-
spring.
If that is an option, I would love that contribution.
I mean,
Yes.
for the improvement in the aesthetics
Hmm.
and the contributions that the farmer's market makes to the city, I think it's very much worth considering.
If it's just the barricades and the signs, wouldn't it be easier just to throw them in the back of a truck and not have to carry them down the alley every time you set them up?
Well, it's all our tents and
What truck?
bins.
I mean, if
I carry
the
them
police
myself.
are doing it anyway, or DPW could help just throw them in a truck, like it can't take that much more time than it already takes the city staff.
I'm not worried too much about it's more just the storing them. I carry 2 of them on my shoulder at a time. It's not a big deal. That part isn't a big deal. It's more just where they belong when they're not being used, which is there. I'm not asking for that, for help setting up. I got that part.
Yeah, it's definitely an improvement over what's there. I mean, as far as design, I mean, the shed looks great.
It's
Looks
just
better than the corral.
simple and
Yes, it does.
And, you know, color, as far as color, neutral.
like I said, I'm not gonna paint a hot pink. I just didn't know if there were any rules for it.
Yeah, and then you can work with Lucas on the details of getting it moved in and out every year. I wouldn't see an issue with it.
I'm fine. I think if it can be moved when it's not being used by
Yeah.
the market, that makes more sense. Especially with the snow back there. Yeah.
Okay, so that, what I'm getting from that is that's a mostly conversation with Lucas of getting it moved there, getting it moved from there in the winter and where it would be going in the winter.
And you would coordinate with him how to build it, the skids on the bottom to make sure.
We were already planning on having it done that way because we had to get it, it's gonna be built at the school. And so it'd have to get brought down here. So.
Proof of concept. There you go.
If you think of all the Amish buildings that they build all over, they move those in backyards all day long.
Right.
And they're much larger than this.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think the other garbage can and recycling, that can be held, talk with Rachel and Lucas with staff on that one as well. And same thing with the
This one?
bike rack with.
Like I said,
with-
don't-
Yeah,
well, the bike rack,
I don't-
Parks and Rec have been
Yeah.
talking about added bike racks around the around the
And I
city,
very-
so
for the garbage
dovetails
can-
with that.
for the garbage, going back to the garbage in Soren Park, I very much feel like that receptacle would get used on not market days too. There's constantly people in the park having picnics and such, so,
And your recycling bin.
yes.
I say the one you have seems
Well, that
adequate.
is compost, so we already have compost.
Oh, you
So
want
do
to.
you have, or behind the yard, there's like 5 or 6 that are specifically for plastic recycling. So I would love to be able to have recycling at the market. So would it be okay if I just rolled one of those bins out? Okay, that was a simple, I just wanted to double check.
Okay, I thought you wanted another compost bin.
No, I don't want any
Never.
compost bins. I'm good with the compost bin.
It gets more action during the week than
It
it does
does,
at
yeah.
the mark.
And then raised garden bed.
so these would be stored on the sidewalk during the farmer's market.
Correct. Yep, right. That,
Against,
right in that farm, in that sidewalk area. Yep. The 2x8 would be like right here.
So they go up at the beginning of the season and stay there,
Correct,
and then come down at the end of the season.
correct.
Just one of them.
They're smaller than they look. I'd get 2 and it would be 2x8 feet total.
Oh, so two small ones. So 2 by 8.
Two of them,
Correct.
really, like,
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of pedestrian
there
traffic
is,
and
and
bicycle
bikes
fights, say,
everywhere.
go back to the bicycle park. But
There
is,
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 yeah.
on market days, there's a lot of people that use that area.
That's where the line coming out of Johanneston.
Yeah. My thought would be to start, if we're gonna allow, like, start with one and see how
Start
that
with one,
goes. I don't know, I'm just throwing, I know it's busy right there.
Right.
I'm totally fine with starting with one.
Well, given-
It's not the optimal spot, but
given the traffic in and out of Johans, would it make sense to move it on the other side of that tree?
I thought about that. I just, I have to have the market booth or the kids booth next to the market booth because I have one person that runs both of
Right,
them.
right.
And that would put like 40 feet at the beginning of market with no vent, with nothing until, so that's just an aesthetic thing for me of the layout of market.
If the people at Johans have agreed to it, they're not gonna worry about it. I don't know that we do.
is that one of the spots for a bike rack normally?
It's right in that neck of the woods.
It's on the other side of the tree. The bike rack goes here
Oh,
Yeah.
and I was hoping to have the garden there. And the line for Johans usually goes there.
If I could just add a quick thought, we have a little bit of language in the city code about the sidewalks.
Okay.
And we have a idea that we have for maintaining a 6-foot clear path. And I think as long as we're maintaining that between where the raised gardens would go, that there's that clear path for the public to walk, then it shouldn't be too
Between,
large. a concern.
between business and the end of the curb, or between the building and the curb, you're saying?
Yeah,
What is that, that's what the 6 foot is?
the distance between whatever obstacle you would place on the sidewalk, that there's a 6-foot path that people can walk down the sidewalk.
That would be a problem, okay. Thank you.
The other question, real quick, I can't see it, I tried to look on Google Earth, where that yellow line is in relationship to where cars park. Is that
It's still at the no parking
okay, that's fine.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put a lot of park spot.
So I Googled it and Google Earth and farmers markets also.
Yeah. But yes, that's still in front of
Okay.
the crisscross lines.
We could try it
Yeah.
if it causes.
I'll put one and
Try
I'll
the
only get
one.
one to
Try
start.
one, and if it causes problems, then we'll have to figure out where else to put it.
Someplace else to put it.
I think one would probably be okay.
We get two so they match, so if it does work.
Oh,
You already
they're
have it.
fully weathered.
No, I meant so they're like.
That's true, so that I don't have to buy it, or that I don't have to make one exactly to match. That's a good call.
You can start it, Jennifer.
I'd be happy to do that.
So could you relocate the kids' tent and we could plant it in the park?
That is a great idea if I have more, I don't have enough employees for that. Because the same, like I said, this person that runs the market booth runs the kids booth, and I think it's important that that is at the front of the market. I thought about the same thing. That was my first thing. I'm like, oh, big garden in the park. I'm like, wait, how do I make that work?
As a trial, makes sense.
Let's try.
Try one.
Yeah.
See if you can get anything to grow.
Potatoes.
Try to
We should
not have
probably ask
everybody
what she's gonna grow.
eat
yeah.
the tomatoes during the week.
Well, it's like my gardens, people are constantly picking stuff out of them.
Yeah,
so-
we'll make a little sign, and it's life. I'm sure that half of the cherry
Signs are
tomatoes
always
will be gone by the next market, but. Great, that's all that I was requesting or asking for.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, yeah, well done.
Yeah, the market is great.
Item 3B, Assessor and Zoning Administrator Jeff Grimm will give an update to council on past year's assessing and zoning issues. And so essentially it's the zoning administrators and assessors report. He does this every spring in April or May, so.
I'm sorry, spring?
Usually late April, early May is when we bring that in.
We missed the snow.
Late winter.
You want to go with the assessors report?
Sure, whichever you prefer. Is that the first one?
Yeah, that's the first.
I took some suggestions from city council and we removed some of the text, added some more graphs, just to make it a little more user-friendly and to at a quicker glance. One of the things that I think is glaringly obviously here, looking at our median sale price, that's something that I've added here. Before, we would include the average number of sales and the median sale price for that year. And we said, let's look at getting a history of that. So, you know, and this clearly shows us what has been in the newspaper and what a lot of people probably saw in their assessment change notices that went out in February is the increase in home values throughout the community. We saw basically a little over an average of 20% increases in home values throughout the city of Harbor Springs over the last year. The number of sales didn't seem to change too much. It fluctuates each year between let's say the high 50s and the low 70s, and this year seemed to be right in line with that. Graphing that out didn't really seem to give me anything meaningful looking at the last 10 years. The taxable values for the city of Harbor Springs, for the state of Michigan, went up by the cost of living, which was the 5% set by the state's mandatory top. The actual cost of living, I think, calculated by the state was 7.9. So the the Constitution or Proposal A limited it to 5%. We also saw a substantial increase in the value of new construction that was brought in. If you look at when we get to the zoning permit report, we'll see some different information there, but the value of the new construction that was added to the roll has been going up each year. Also, the DDA capture has been getting some nice growth to it. That pretty much wraps up the assessor's report. If anybody has any questions, I'll keep it quick for you so we can move on, unless you have anything that you'd like to discuss through it with it.
Go to the zoning report and then, yeah.
Sure. So we did have some changes from previous year. Larry Nix, who was our planning consultant for a number of years, retired. It was great working with him. He really helped us out quite a bit. John Icoangeli with Beckett and Rader was hired this year to take over. Some of you, I'm sure, already know, but just in case anybody in the audience wasn't aware of that. The number of permits this year, most of them stayed the same. One change, even though I just said in the assessor's report that the value of construction went up, the number of permits for larger projects, for zoning permits, went down a little bit. That was a trend from the year before as well. Back in 2020, we had a little over 40 permits, and we've been trending down each year since then. I don't know if 2020 was abnormally high. I didn't have any information from before that to work with. If that was the unique issue or if what we're seeing is the difference there. But the scope of the projects are getting bigger, where the number of permits are coming down. The other permits with, sign permits, awnings, fences, things like that, they seem to be running pretty steady here. Current tasks, we've been continuing to work with the RRC committee in making sure that we're as open with all of our applications and processes for planning and zoning and what needs to happen there. We've updated a lot of the permits. We have a lot more of those permits online and on the website. And I believe we're also working with the RRC committee and a number of other options for showing how we can easily smooth through some projects so that everybody is up to date and knows what a clear path that they might have for any special land use request or things like that might be.
Goals and objectives.
Oh yeah, goals and objectives. So yes, finishing zoning code review. We finished the master plan review last year. The planning commission has been working on the zoning code, bringing that up to date with the new master plan. Also looking at some other ideas. Bill Mulder was in with a really nice presentation explaining some of those ideas that we're currently looking at. I believe the plan is to have that wrapped up with a draft version of a new zoning code somewhere at the end of 2023 or maybe early 2024. I did get a call from somebody that had some questions of what that means. At our last planning commission meeting, we had a couple of diagrams showing some potential ideas. One concern that was brought up was that we would be overly punishing and forcing people on with larger setbacks. And I want to make sure that throughout the discussion, we have not been talking about that. So nothing so far that has been proposed would create any new nonconformities. But if anybody has any further questions on that, they can certainly contact me to discuss. We do have new software that we're going to be having. We should have that implemented sometime this summer. It's an upgrade to existing software that we have for the assessing and tax programs, and then we'll be adding a new module for planning and zoning to that we didn't have before. And you should see those changes coming here midsummer. And that's more of an in-house internal thing. It'll be a nice addition.
Perhaps easy to read.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
One of your slides said that you had issued 10 letters of violation.
So whenever any property owner contacts me and notifies me that there's a potential zoning violation, or if driving through the community, I see one on my own, that would be an opportunity where I would reach out with a letter, contact that property owner that there's a potential zoning violation. and work with them to resolve that issue. 99% of the time, one letter resolves the issue and they solve the problem without it needing to go
I'm
any
just
forward.
curious what the 10 violations are.
We've sometimes it's blight. I think the most typical are blight situations where, let's say, people have, leftover wood products or something from a construction project that they've left in their yard, or leftover machinery or appliances that don't get taken care of. Things of that nature that we have to send a letter and say, this can't be stored outside any yard. Another example would be, we do have a tall grass ordinance.
I was wondering.
Yeah, so,
Just curious.
yeah.
One of the graphs I thought was interesting, I think it was in the assessor's report, the difference between residential and commercial. You were just there, Victor. Where the commercial's an absolutely flat line. And it's. You can take that for what it's worth.
It's certainly, yeah, it's certainly been much more stable. I think there's a couple key factors. One, I don't think that it was impacted as heavily from the 2008, 2009 housing market crash, where we definitely saw on the graph here a drop in assessed and taxable values. And then with that turnaround and rise again, the commercial properties seem to be much more stable. And I think that's the same case in most communities. Also, the difference on the graph there from the green line and the blue is just, we don't have nearly as many parcels, so the total value isn't as high.
Yeah, so commercial's pretty well built out at this point.
We have seen some new projects going in. There's the stuff that the cottage company is building, the new commercial buildings across from the movie theater. So we do have some new construction that came in there. That certainly helped with the captured value for the DDA. So a lot of the growth there has been for some projects like that. But yes, for the most part, the downtown commercial is fairly built out. Is there any information that you didn't see in here that you'd like to see next year? Is there any information that was on there that you just don't care about? Don't say the whole thing. If you do think of anything, just let me know. We can certainly add it.
That's a good, thank you. It's a good summary and the graph's really good.
And I do think when we get that software implemented for planning and zoning, we'd be able to do more with the data, because we have better
Certainly.
system for tracking the data.
We will definitely increase with our ability to track projects. There may, I don't think it's part of it right away, but there is an aspect or a module to that may provide us with the ability to have something on our website where people could, if they have a complaint, they can submit it right on the website. It also applies the ability to track the progress of that complaint. And then I'm sure we would be able to have some type of a report that we would generate from that as well. We'll see.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 3C is the short-term rental ordinance. So for at least a couple of years now, the city has been considering and reconsidering the short-term rental ordinance. In the past year and a half, the planning commission has really taken to task and looked at it, hammered it, and came to compromise over a lot of the parts of the ordinance. There's a lot to it. They considered a lot. And what they ultimately decided on was two main aspects of this short-term rental ordinance, or updating existing ordinance. And that is, one is to cap the short-term rentals in the R1 and AR zoning districts to a total of 61. That would keep the amount of short-term rental licenses available in the other districts at unlimited. And the second is to establish a short-term rental waiting list for those seeking to get out a license in the R1 or AR zoning districts if all 61 licenses for the year have been taken out. So they would be put on a wait list, similar to how we have a wait list for our moorings and slips and kayak space. So that's in the gist of it, but obviously there's several pages of an ordinance and rules that kind of outline, or the rules. So we have two things, right? We have the ordinance, and then the ordinance establishes us to have put rules in place. And those rules can be more readily or easily modified. And it's again modeled after our wait list for the slips and moorings. So it's something we have precedent for, but Attorney Jim Raymer and Jeff Prim worked on it, quite extensively. So it wasn't an easy thing to put together because there's a lot too short-term rentals are different than homes are different than, a boat slip, but the model is generally the same. So that's essentially what we have here. The rules are broken down into 4 different sections. The first is your average, definitions, what the natural person means, what short-term rental means, et cetera. The second section outlines certain rules for short-term rentals, such as advertising, that application is required, defines the length of a license, which is a calendar year. The third section, which is the meat of the rules, describes application procedures, as well as what it takes to renew a license. It also describes the waitlist process. And finally, section D talks about our penalties and how to amend the rules. The PC recommended 2 more modifications, essentially to the ordinance and rules. And one is that upon the death of the owner, the new owner shall be allowed to keep the license throughout the duration of the calendar year, so that not to create an inconvenience for any pre-booked rentals. So right now, it only goes to the spouse, as we have it written in the rules. This would be just for that year. If the short-term rental owner would die, that whoever takes over ownership can have that license for the remainder of that year, just so it doesn't kind of disrupt the continuity of operations for that and for guest expectations. The second, but however, it would not renew again the next year. They have to go back in the wait list unless it went to a spouse. That's how it's written now. The second thing was to just have a general policy goal, whether it's stated in the actual ordinance or somewhere, that we aim to reduce the short-term rentals to a 5% of total homes in the R1 and AR district. This PC spent some time discussing a lot of different things. One included that did not make the cut for this ordinance or rules was having, looking at density of short-term rentals per neighborhood. There was some discussion about that throughout several meetings. Determined at this point it wasn't feasible or desired by planning commission at this point. There was also not a lot of, there wasn't consensus around the idea of who it should pass down, the license should be passed down to upon death. So there was some discussion there. Ultimately, they voted to push this on to council because they decided and for a long time, and they felt this was the best version they could get, but there's still some discussion and questions about, who can the license go to? Should it just be a spouse? There was discussion about whether it should go to children, whether it should go to different owners. And there was a lot of discussion about that at the council level, and there's not consensus on that issue, but they still recommended the overall ordinance to go to council like that. So for those in the audience, maybe you have or haven't seen it, but it has been part of the packet. There's an ordinance and there are rules that have been established. The planning commission held a public hearing at its previous planning commission meeting, as well as several discussions about this the past year and a half. So this is the result of those discussions, listening to many different residents and short-term rental owners, and different opinions from different planning commission members and different staff analysis about this. So there's a lot that went into this. And not everyone's happy about it, but there's a lot of give and take in this, and a lot of work went into it. So at this point, what we're looking for council is to review and discuss the ordinance, if there's any modifications, or to approve as is. Obviously, of course, to take public comment.
We'll do the public comment first.
Is there any way that you all can give us a short synopsis of what a short-term rental is? And if it's legal or not legal, where do you decide? And if you get a short-term rental are you having problems? What do the adjacent homeowners have anything to do with it?
Short-term rental is anything under 30 days. And if there's a problem, call the police.
And then people leave that weekend and it's over.
We go after the property owner.
Depending on the nature of the complaint, you
Nature of
can
the
go, if it's something that individual particularly did, the police will investigate that. If it's like, for example, it's an assault or something, that doesn't go with the property owner. But there are, if it's a property issue, the police will investigate either way. And we have a detailed process in here for how to hold suspension hearings, how to give tickets to property owners who violate any of the rules in the short-term rental orders or any court
Then
violations.
I need to ask you a question. How, if you've got all these rules, how could an Airbnb, B&B buy a property or do something and bypass these rules and do something in a house in a R2 residential area that makes it a weekend party rental, and you have absolutely no option as a homeowner to do anything about it? And you all didn't know anything about it, or said you didn't know anything about it. And they built and did the house above my house to turn it into a short-term party rental. And they moved the walls, did everything else. And then it got shut down for one other reason. How come y'all didn't know that that was going on?
I don't know if we know that.
Then
one. As a
but as a
specific,
homeowner, what would you do?
call the police, and the police get with Jeff, and Jeff writes a letter, and there's a whole process in the rules.
As with most of our ordinances and rules on the book, it starts with calling the police or the city to make a complaint. We aren't everywhere. So it's just like with anything, if someone's speeding, someone's, assaulting someone, all these things, we rely heavily on our residents. And I know a lot of residents feel like, well, we shouldn't have to be the enforcement and monitoring, but that's just the nature of the beast, is we don't have those arms to be everywhere at all times. So it really relies heavily on residents making that complaint. So there is some obligation on residents and neighbors to kind of be the police in a way to call the police. And that's just how we do things. It's just not feasible.
I kind
otherwise.
of talked to what you had mentioned about what happened above you. I think that this whole process was started for issues like that. So now we have something in place where if it's an Airbnb or whatever these other websites are, we have a company that monitors those. And if we say, okay, this one's not registered and it's listed here for rent by the night, they're gonna get a letter. And then they'll get a police
So
officer.
there is some.
Yeah, that's what this is all about.
Okay.
So for things like that don't happen as much as we can control it. I mean, if somebody's just renting in it, not putting it on Airbnb, just word of mouth, we're not gonna know unless the community tells us.
Right.
And to provide a very brief background on this, when I started here in 2015, we had very little regulation regarding short-term rentals. It was basically a by right use of property. And because of some of the situations like you're describing, we started putting together this licensing process to better have, the ability to regulate and control the negative aspects that sometimes come with short-term rental use. So, we put the license in place, I believe around 2018. And we've been continuing to refine it each year to, make sure that we have a good working system that works for both to protect your interest as a neighbor to a short-term rental, and also the property owner's rights that may own that short-term rental, and find that middle ground that tries to work best for everybody.
Is there a definition of short-term?
Yes, it is.
It's on the screen.
Victor has it on the screen right now, and it is part of our ordinance. Basically, it's any, duration of stay of 30 days or less of somebody that would be renting the property to come and visit Harbor Springs.
One day to 30 days, rent it for a Friday and Saturday, that's considered short-term.
And we pulled that primarily, there have been various bills proposed at the state level. And that's similar terminology that they've used in what they've described as vacation rental or short-term rental.
One last question. If you have a problem and you call the police and it turns to be a repetitive problem, what do you do then?
They
With
can,
the owner.
the owner can lose,
Short-term rental.
They can.
they can lose their license, and if they continue to
Quickly?
operate, they
Yeah.
You
can.
do it quickly?
Yeah, we've
There's a
done-
process in place.
It's evolved.
Yeah, it's evolved. We've done 5 or 6 modifications to this
I
ordinance.
know you all, do. Just curious where we stood.
It's much quicker now. I mean, I guess, am I right? It's
Yeah,
one
we-
morning?
We used to do like 3 letters,
Yeah.
now it's 1 letter.
Yeah, so it's
And
much
there's a
quicker.
suspension, there's a suspension hearing, removal here. So yeah, for repetitive offenders, there's a process in place.
And if they
Penalty,
lose it, they
whoever
don't.
owns the property can't do it anymore? Is that,
Yeah,
is that the penalty?
if they lose their license, they can't get it back, correct? The same property for that, then they can't have it back.
If we revoke the license, yes.
Yeah,
Either
if we
you can either
revoke it.
suspend it or revoke it.
Right, right, then they can't have
Is this only for R1?
R1 and AR.
Yeah.
Well, no, so let me clarify that. The rules are in place for all short-term rentals. The wait list is only for R1 and AR. So there's a cap of 61 short-term rentals in R1 and AR. But the rules,
R2 is not involved.
R2 is,
Yeah, let's.
R2 does have rules. All these short-term rental rules do apply to R2. But there's no cap of the number of short-term rentals that can be in the R2 district, for example.
If I could just add, so we permit them throughout the city of Harbor Springs, but they have to have a license. Within the central business district, B1 districts, and any multiple residential district, we don't have a limit on the number of licenses, but they still have to apply. We do have a limit on the number of licenses that are available in the single family zoning districts.
Thank you.
Is there a list, like such as if I'm a neighbor, can I find out if they have a license or not?
If you contact me, I'll give you that information.
Okay, so there is a list that I can.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chief Knight, did you have a comment?
Just in reference to people being disorderly as well, besides the short-term rental, we can also go after criminally under our disorderly statutes. Let's say your neighbors play music at 3 in the morning in their short-term rental, we can also handle the criminal aspect of it as well.
You said there was a limit of 61. Where are we today?
61.
We're at 61.
So basically, there is no more.
in the
Correct.
R1.
And that's the reason that we're setting up this wait list. Because, you know, people have asked, how will it work? Who would be the next person in line if one of those 61 says, I don't want to do it anymore? And a little bit of background, last year we had 61. We had about 4 or 5 that chose to not continue and do it for this year, not renew their license. So those 5 licenses were available to new property owners to apply. This is just creating a system that would manage that for us, or help us with that.
Can I have one more question? Does it have anything to do with long-term rentals?
Does not.
Yes or no?
It's a separate rule in the city code. So,
Margie Marks, 818 Arbor Street. It's noted that the 5% goal, pull that up, I think that was in the beginning, is recommended but not noted in the ordinance. And I would request that it would be, I know it's not a rule, sorry, not a rule, but a goal. And you had mentioned that it may or may not be written into the ordinance.
So maybe Jim can explain. I don't think that an ordinance itself is meant to be regulated, and you can't necessarily regulate a policy goal, but usually we could include things like that in the whereas section of an ordinance, like whereas the council desires to.
But we haven't gotten to discuss that.
No, not yet.
Haven't gotten to what, I'm sorry?
We haven't gotten to discuss that
Council.
yet. It's one of the proposals from the planning commission.
Right. So I would just request that it would be in print, because if it's not there to be reminded of, then I think that thought may dissipate.
yeah.
What is the 5% number? If we're at 61 right now, what is the hard number for 5%?
If there's about 1,000 in the R1 AR, There's about 1,000 residences,
About 50, but that can fluctuate.
about 50 depending on.
The 5% could actually swing the other direction with new construction. We could be at 63.
Yeah.
Or 64,
Yeah.
depending, but
I think we've estimated that right now it's with the 61 licenses in R1, we're at probably about 6.5% to 7%. So it would be a small reduction from where we're at now.
Anyone else?
In the public, we do have online, so I'll go, John Fox.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, say good work to the planning commission and to the council. This is a challenging topic and there's a lot of differences of opinion. There's no doubt about it. And I appreciate the views coming out of the planning commission. And I believe, Nancy, you were one of the ones speaking about again, let's take this slow. Let's start with lower regulation. Let's see how the topic evolves. Let's collect the data that's important to follow up on to see if there's positives or if there's negatives. So again, I wanted to make sure I thanked everybody for that. The one thing I would recommend is when someone does pass, I would treat it as you could pass this on to immediate family. And that would include spouse and any immediate children. I'm not sure why an immediate family member, a son or a daughter wouldn't be considered. I think they would choose at the end of the year to decide if they wanted to continue renting or not. But I think they should be treated as an equal family member. So other than that, again, a lot of work that's been put into this. I've been on a few of the calls, sending a note, and I want to thank everybody for their time on it.
Thank you.
Louise.
Hi, Louise Finkelstein, 358 Church Street. I have a question. I'm not seeing anywhere in here. Do license that one page where it says who the owner is and the contact number have to be posted in the houses? Is that listed somewhere in here?
So if I could just add, this ordinance is talking about language that would be added to the existing
Alright.
language that we have for the previous ordinance, and that's already in the city code. And
And
that information is in that portion of
And
the,
then when do those licenses have to be posted? I'm just noticing around town, there's a lot of VRBOs or Airbnb rented out by a local company that used to have paperwork by the doors, but no longer does. And they're active rentals because they're advertised in their window. So I'm just, is there a start and end or?
Louise, they have to be advertised when they are being used as short-term rentals.
So when a person is in there, so when they are advertising it as a rental currently, it should have paperwork posted.
When they are being used as
When
a.
there are people staying.
So when people are in there or when it's being advertised?
When it's being used as a short-term rental.
Okay,
That's when it needs to be, the local agent needs to be advertised because, the local agent information needs to be displayed because of the situation. Take, for example, if you can still be advertising your short-term rental, but you could be there for a few months as an owner, but still be
Right.
advertising for it. So there'd be no need for you to post a local agent's name and address if there's not a short-term rental there. That's the whole goal of having a local agent for when.
all right, so,
there are
okay,
visitors.
all right, thank you.
Any others on Zoom? That's all we got. So council, it's for your discussion.
All right. Well, thank you to the planning commission.
Yeah, seriously, a lot of hard work went into this. Well done.
It's probably not the end of it. I guess the one thing that caught my eye, it's got the aim to reduce it to 5%, but we've got the 61 cap. I mean, 61's 7%. How do you ever get to 5%?
So one of the things that was talked about at the planning commission is, for example, let's say there's no one on the wait list, and then in 1 year, only 59, there's only 59 licenses. So then you lower that cap to 59, which now lowers it to, 6.25%. So that would be the way to do it. That's not written to the ordinance, but that was an idea of how you could get to that 5% is by rolling back that cap.
So the cap would go down if there were less applicants,
Yes. That was one.
and that would set the new bar.
Do we have anyone on the waiting list today?
We don't have a waiting list right now, so no. We've had several people that have inquired about it, and I'm sure that if there's action taken tonight, I will have people contacting me tomorrow to be on it. Probably at least 5 or 6 people that are interested.
So my expectation is we're gonna have a waiting list.
Right.
There's enough demand.
Yeah.
I think my opinion is a 5% is rather arbitrary. I don't know how you get to 5%.
Right.
And I don't know why we need a 5% today, because we're making changes that will lead us to a better understanding. I would wait and see how the waiting list operates. Just like the marina, we're gonna have a perpetual list of people that want to implement short-term rentals. So I certainly wouldn't add it to the ordinance or hardwire it anywhere. Let's wait and see what happens. For a town without hotels and a demand for short-term rentals, I'd let it roll.
I think too, there's so much going on with changing the zoning in general that there's no point in putting it at 5% when everything could change.
You're talking about the zoning code update.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of moving parts, so.
Yeah.
If there were a compelling need to do it today, I think it would be different, but I just don't see a need to do it today.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff or Bill, but we haven't gotten to this part of the zoning code, but one of the things that is topics that may be discussed is we're looking at those zoning districts. And if those zoning districts change, that could change, the outlook of how many homes are within a zoning district and maybe which zoning districts are part of this. So that's what,
Yeah, that was what I was.
If we consolidate residential areas, that number could change.
Yeah, that's what Jamie was getting at with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good point.
So I have one other area of it that I'd like to touch on. It was what John was talking about. That when the owner passes away, that it can only go to a spouse. And I'm struggling with that a little bit. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. What if 2 brothers own a house? What happens? What if a father and a son own the house? What happens when someone passes on? It doesn't make sense. So with some input of some heads together, what if we were able to word it somehow about whoever inherits the home or the portion of the home would then have the capability to get a renewal. Also, what if there's another 50% owner? They also should have the ability to have that. I don't have the wording down exactly, but I think we need to look at that. I'm not comfortable with just spouse. The trust, the LLCs, that's going to complicate it a little bit. There are smarter people than I am to deal with the language for that. But I do think that's an area I'm not 100% comfortable with the way we have the ordinance written.
Well, I think it's a complicated topic because of all the different variables. I think the planning commission spent a lot of time talking about, we really went down a rabbit hole there for something that I'm not sure is going to happen very often.
Right.
And I certainly wouldn't try to put a lot of definition into the ordinance about how to deal with it. Like you said, it makes perfect sense for a co-owner or a partner to be able to continue it. I like the idea, first generation, if it stays in the family. Spouse seems kind of too limiting.
The only point I would raise there is it becomes difficult to manage. It becomes a perpetual ownership situation. If a family member, if you have immediate family and it passes to a son and then passes to the son of that son, and it just stays, there's no transition. Same way with having partners you know, new partners can be brought in. How do you control that? You get into game playing by people, you know.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And this, believe me, it will happen. It happened extensively in the marina, in the mooring rental arrangements. People would own boats together, and one person would sell his interest, the other person would have the mooring. They'd bring a new partner in, and then they would just keep the mooring. It stayed with the boat, but different owners owned the boat, and it would be the same thing with ownership of a house. So that was we tried to model, at least the planning commission did, try to model the rules relating to short-term rentals after the experience that came out of managing the mooring rentals.
Okay, I was unaware of the connection to the you know, the tattoo you already have from the experience with the mooring. So that's good to know.
What if you capped it from the original application? What if you said that can happen one time? I mean, is there a way, I'm just uncomfortable
Right, I
with what if
understand.
two brothers own the house? One of the brothers passes away and he's married and his wife can get it, but the other brother can't. I'm
One thing that-
struggling with that.
And I don't know if this would be too complicated, but on the application, you list one other owner that it could, or two other, they could get passed down to, and that's it. And after that, you know. But.
Well, that's kind of back to the new question, is that a
But-
reasonable way?
No, but it would be the
From the
original
from the original
application.
application.
Right, I agree with saying it back to the original application.
You have to go back to the original application. Say I own a house with my sister and I put one of our children as a person it can go to. And then that's the end of it from the original application. It's more complicated.
Yeah.
I agree, but I'm still uncomfortable with
You
picking
end up
just
talking
one
about a
spouse.
succession during application for a short-term rental. Okay.
Beneficiary.
Yeah, seriously. For something that, I mean, the frequency is gonna be pretty low, I would expect. but-
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen. And if there is a sale, it totally negates it. I mean, it just doesn't happen if someone sells it.
That's an
To get on
automatic.
the
They have
wait
to-
list.
They have to start
Wait.
over.
Yeah, that was.
So we're clarifying, this is upon death.
This is upon death of the
Right.
owner, right?
We got a problem. Who do you write the letter to? If you got all these people, if there's a problem, who do you write the letter to?
Well, you know, the other option is just not allow it to pass it off.
Right.
I mean, that's the other option is to say the owner dies, it's done, not even the
Just
spouse.
make it like a sale of the
Happen.
property.
Yeah.
So it
I
would
mean-
continue to the end of that year because we've
And
already
then it would
issued
be
it, and then it
completely done.
terminates.
Yeah.
You don't really think families are gonna give these up, do you? These are gonna become like gold to these families. So if you allow them to pass on, that's forever. If you
Well,
don't-
that's the experience.
Yeah, that's what we're trying.
Although the condition for the marina, that wasn't a.
I
that
really do.
was
It's
just
really
general.
hard to know where to.
And that condition is in there.
I'm sorry, what? I
Well,
The marina.
Marina, I was just asking about the history with the marina.
But I feel like if, like Nancy said, if you list two people on your original application and once you take over, then they can reapply as the new owner and list somebody on their application, but they are reapplying. They're not guaranteed. They're getting back on the wait list as the new owner. And that would help prevent it from switching hands like that.
That would make it like a sale of the property versus.
We just do it once. I mean, from the original application, you just let that happen once.
So then the person, just to think this through, because we're gonna have to try to figure it out here.
Right.
I feel like administratively, that would be a nightmare 5 years from now.
Right.
If Nick unfortunately has a short-term rental and passes away and he's listed his son, and the son gets it, and I have not passed away and I have mine, and 5 years later, I pass away and my son gets his, but Nick's son then says, oh, when I pass away, I can pass it on. Now we have to try and keep track that Nick's son can't have a beneficiary on his but my son can, or situations where some people can and some people can't, I think that would be very difficult to try.
Genealogy then would become our
To,
specialty.
you know, I mean, I think
Right.
at the beginning of it, it sounds very workable, but I think 5 years into that, I think it would become very difficult to try and track who can have a second name and who can't.
Right.
Well, then that maybe the best thing to do is just not. to
We're going
allow
down
it to
another
pass
rabbit
by.
hole here, trying
Yeah.
to figure out a
Just
very
don't do it.
complex sequence of
So
what
just
ifs.
don't let it pass on.
I would say
Right.
terminates at the end of the year.
Finish, finish the season out and then they have to reapply. I mean, that's the
I mean, if,
simple.
in my view, if you're trying to avoid a situation where someone has a vested interest in, you know, their short-term rental license, they've got it and they can pass it on, they
They'll
can
never give it
control
up.
it, they can, you know, pass to a new owner. Well, that's one thing, but if you're trying to promote equity, let people who haven't had short-term rental but want to,
Yeah.
give them an opportunity.
It helps
to
with that
have it
too.
work.
Yeah.
Somebody else has had it for a lifetime, and
Because eventually we will get to the point over time, even decades, where we have 61 licenses held by 61 separate families.
It never
That will be
changes.
forever.
Never change.
So the language then, what we have currently in the rules, what we'll be talking about removing, if that's Councilmember Rondel's suggestion is, this currently says this exception shall not apply in a successor marriage of such assignee spouse after the death of or divorce of the original license holder. We would just remove that and replace that upon death, the license remains until the end of the year, and then that's it.
That's the simplest.
I think that's the best.
That's the
Right.
simplest, if we're not going down.
And it does address the issue of a perpetual waiting list. Yeah, I like it simple and it doesn't burden anybody. And our objective is to regulate short-term licenses, not to try to figure out.
So we're talking about the
Then
applicant,
successor marriage.
we're talking about the applicant of the license. So if you have a husband and wife who jointly own a house and the applicant is the husband and the husband passes away, the license doesn't go on to the wife. I mean, that's what we're saying. Am I-
That's what we're saying.
So is
Really
that
clear about what we're saying.
if a couple owns the house, the applicant can only be by one person, it is not by Mr. and Mrs. John
That's the way
Smith
it's written.
applying for the license?
designate one person.
One person, that's the way it's.
Okay,
written.
If you all make that change, you're gonna have to start from scratch on all these applications. It's okay. Here's your 61. Now, how do you want to handle it? You can't just make that decision. You
So
can't make
that's,
that decision.
we can make that
We
decision. Yeah. So the 61 that we have in place right now,
Kinds of money.
the 61 we have in place right now is based off of administrative ordinance the council passed earlier this year, I believe, or it was late last year, but earlier this year, they put a 61 cap through until we found out a permanent ordinance. So this permanent ordinance now will go into effect whenever it goes into effect for 2024 and new rules.
Can I ask one more question?
But yes, we're gonna get some calls.
Well, and it doesn't impact any of the current license holders. Or the applicant, or how they would carry forward to the next
They can.
license cycle.
I know, I think that right now it states like calendar year, but if somebody passes in like December, they probably already have it rented
You
for the
get
next
to, you
year.
get to fill out the year of the license. So like 20, if they applied for their license in 24 and they passed away, if they happen to pass away in December, their license ends in 23. I mean, it's, I don't know how else you can do that.
Right.
though.
There's
You have a
no, again, we're
license
back to these.
expire.
Right.
Yeah. And hopefully we're not gonna have this happen.
Exactly.
Like, right.
Exactly.
It's not-
I think, like, when you look at the husband, wife, well, that's a tough one. I mean, I'll use you example, Mayor, if you passed away tomorrow, Jane, if you guys had rentals, she would be out.
Right.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, but in some sense, all of these decisions down this tree are tough. That's just the most obvious one.
So I was clarify, I said, I highlighted the wrong part. This would be the part that would provide that a license may be assigned as spouse of the license either in life or upon death. That we would eliminate that in section 5, C5 of the rules. Then replace that with, upon death, the license remains to the end of the year, calendar year.
The license year.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
calendar.
yeah.
I think that's
I
right.
think, yeah, I think that's what it does.
Pushback from it.
The word spouse, though, what if they're legal partners? They're, I don't know what all the terminology is, but what if it is not a traditional husband and
Well,
wife?
that's what I'm talking
That
about.
was
What
part
if
of
your
the
two
problem.
brothers owning the house? So the only simple way to do it is the license is done at the end of that license period.
So this would be eliminated. So
That would
we're not talking
eliminate
about
Spouse would be
all of it.
removed.
Oh,
Yes,
I don't know, I don't have a fan.
like in right here too, except for transfer spouses.
So they would just have to reapply.
They'd have
As
to
a new
go
owner.
to the wait
The
list.
youngest one.
They just have to go on to the wait list, just like anybody else would.
And I think that's the key, because with all of this, we're talking about potential exceptions that would allow somebody to keep a license and not go back to the wait list. And the more exceptions we think about adding, the longer that wait list would get and the longer people would be on that wait list before a license would be available to them. So by minimizing how many exceptions we potentially have, we can help expedite that wait list so people aren't stuck on it for too long.
Yeah, if our goal is to turn the wait list.
And administratively, you don't want to have any
Right.
exceptions.
It's the simplest way administrative.
Right.
And this also does not prevent people from renting their property for more than 30 days. And we already have
Right.
some
Oh,
people
right.
that we've talked with that don't have a license, and so that's what they've started doing, so that they're not.
For a month, 31 days at a time.
What do you need from us?
So, unless there's other discussion, what I would need from the council is to approve with the amendment as proposed, which would be to eliminate, and this is language that Jim would draft and not subject to my approval based on your approval, so that we don't have to come back here to discuss this again, would be to eliminate, to revise section 5, to no longer provide, allow the license to be assigned to the spouse during life or upon death. And so eliminate all that language of it passing on. So upon death, and then add a language upon death, the license remains throughout that license year, which is a calendar year, and then does not pass on to anyone. They must go on the wait list. So with that language, fine tuned by Jim Raymer, of course, then we'll, and approved by me, then we'll put that on, that'll be the ordinance and rules. So the ordinance will actually stay the same. So this is amendment to the rules. So really, the ordinance as is would be, I believe, adopted tonight, and then the rules could just be changed based on that language that I just provided here.
Just need to adopt the ordinance.
And approve, and approve the rules.
Approve the rules subject to the changes that we've been discussing. Well, I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, John Leo,
Yes.
Matt McGuire,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
and Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried. I don't want to drag this out any longer. I'm tired of talking about short-term rentals, but we need to make sure, because we have a list of 61. I know for a fact there's husband and wife names on there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a trust on there. That's.
Don't those forms have an applicant?
It's gonna affect these. We're gonna have to reach out to these people. They're gonna have to know this.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
And we've already started updating stuff. I have a draft application for the wait list that's prepared. So anybody that would like to do this, if they want to come in first thing tomorrow morning to fill that out, we are prepared for that. There's a fee listed, so as long as they have that application and that fee, first come, first served for getting on that wait list, and we're ready for it. But yeah, we have taken into consideration that we have that language, and we'll address it as we move forward. It's right on that new application.
And it's gonna have to be a name that is, in my mind, owner of the property. I want my daughter, who's not even listed on the property, to hold the license because I'm 89 years old with cancer. I mean, I look at all these scenarios because they happen. So somehow we have to be able to monitor that business as
And the
well.
language we do have is effective control.
Effective control of the entity.
Yeah, and that's.
Yes. exactly.
And so you need
But
to
that's a single
define
person.
what you have to prove they have control of that.
Just throwing that out there. These are gonna be the first of the
Yeah.
calls
Oh,
that
yeah.
we get.
Yeah.
Nick, I'll show you the application. I think I've addressed your concern there. We talked about it some.
And thanks again to the planning commission for a good job.
We'll see you again on short-term rentals in 6 months.
At least a year.
All right, thank you, council, planning commission, Jim, appreciate all the work you guys put in this, Jeff. Item 3D, noise control ordinance. Last council meeting, we revised and we reviewed and had council had some suggestions for changes to the noise ordinance edits that the noise control committee had provided. I said I would make those edits, give the public some more time to look at the proposed ordinance and edits, and then come back to council for final approval. Recap of, very quickly, of those changes are, we reduced the decibel limit from radios, sound amplifiers, and musical instruments to maximum 55 decibels during the hours of 11 PM to 7 AM. The current is 70 decibels or 76 based on the district. Created an exception for the city's noon whistle. Create a process for the city to approve decibel limit exceptions at clubs. Defining church bells and continue to allow bells to be exempt from the decibel limits, not exempting music from churches from the decibel limits, and not allowing artificial bells to exceed the decibel limits. Scaling back the time frame from when lawn equipment can exceed the decibel limit. Currently, it's from 8 AM to 9:30 PM, Monday to Saturday. The proposed change is from 8 AM until 8 PM, Monday through Friday. And council had asked to make it 5 to 6 PM on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. Scaled back the time frame from when residents personally do construction on their homes can exceed the decibel limit. Currently is from 7 AM to 9 PM. Proposed change is from 7 AM to 8 PM, Monday through Friday. Again, 10 AM to 6 PM on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. And then change the time frame for when construction machinery, so not you doing personal construction at your home, but having a company come do it, can exceed the decibel limits on Saturdays from 8 AM to 5 PM, currently to 10 AM to 6 PM. So those are the mostly result of the hard work by the noise control committee, but a few suggestions and changes by council. So council already saw this last time, so really it's here if there's any more comment from the public, and then for council to give its final discussion and approval. So I'll open it up to, want to open it up?
Any public comment? Thank you for not making any noise.
So we do, so then the motion by council will be to approve ordinance number 436.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance. No, second.
Matt Bulgara.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
And Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, council.
A motion to dissolve the
Oh,
noise committee.
yes.
Actually, I think everybody resigned.
That would be good.
Self-imploded. Okay, item 3E, a donation acceptance policy. This was brought to my attention by Rachel Loon, our Parks Director, that the city of Charlevoix had a general policy for accepting donations. As you know, we've have donation programs like the Donate a Tree program, and we also have, we do receive donations for events like Sledding at Kiwanis, and we did donation fundraisers for the boardwalk and the skate park. But we often regularly receive requests to donate money for projects or for specific causes or services. And police receives, Chief Knight, you regularly receive donation from foundation for your services, right? So we do get donations. We also had 1 year anonymous donor donate during COVID to pay for a residence's late payments that could not afford to pay their bills on time. So we had anonymous donor donate to that. So we get a lot of donation requests, and a lot of them are great, a lot of them are good things. But what we didn't have is a way to, decide some of these donations that could, have a substantial impact on the community, how to, review those donations, and whether, we didn't have guidelines for reviewing them and whether or not to accept them or how to accept them. So the city of Charlevoix has a long donation policy that they've implemented last year. I took that as a model, spliced it up a little, changed things around to make it fit what I thought was appropriate for the city of Harbor Springs. For example, one thing the city of Charlevoix didn't have was, mention about conformity with our plans, like our master plan, our parks plan, so that when people make donations, I thought we should have at least that consideration that the donations that are being given to the city, conform with, or at least don't contradict our goals and plans. So this policy has 5 sections. The first is obviously the policy purpose, to establish guidelines, standards, and procedures for the acceptance of gifts to the city, including the installation, long-term maintenance, and operation of donated elements to the city, which will enhance the quality of life. Section 2 talks about the procedures for making a donation, describes when donations do not need to go to city council. For example, we already have a donate a tree program. We don't need to go back to the council for every time someone wants to donate a tree, but provides a process for all other donations. Then we've created, and a lot of this was modeled on Charlevoix's policy of consideration guidelines, establishes guidelines that council should consider. There's no required balance or how to approach them, but all these guidelines should be considered when considering donation. And those are alignment with the city plans, maintenance costs, predicted maintenance costs of that donation. If they're installing something at a park, for example, some donors pay for the initial install, but then we don't, we need to give consideration to what are the maintenance costs? Is it $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year, $20 a year? So those things need to be considered. The uniqueness of the project, impact on the property, impact on public health and safety, and then aesthetics. Then there's a section on installation of fixed assets, which requires an agreement to be signed between the city and donor and gives the city complete control of the construction. And finally, removal and relocation. City has ultimate right to remove or relocate any donated item. So a lot of this is geared to physical infrastructure, but it also could apply to any other donations as well. So that's the policy in more detail. I'm sure you had time to look at it along with the guidelines. So if there's any suggested changes or not, I think it'll be a good thing for the city to give staff some guidance and council, future policymakers guidance, because we don't want to be running without some sort of, precedent. It's hard to know, like, all right, well, 2 years ago, we approved this donation for this person, but then for this other person, we had a different, approach to it. Why? Well, now we have a policy that guides us, and we can point to something that directs us on how to approach these.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's fine with me. I didn't see anything I didn't like in it.
No,
It's much needed and.
right, well, the consistency that it gives you, the objectivity, I think is very useful.
So if there's any public comment on this?
Look at it. You want to make a donation?
$1. So I need a motion to approve. Yeah.
She'll make the motion to approve the donation policy.
I'll second.
Nancy Randall,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
Matt Walagora,
Yes.
and Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great, thank you. All right, 3F is a 2023-2028 clerical union bargaining agreement. We did come to council last meeting with this, so this is essentially the same thing that council saw, except that the administrative assistant position for the police department will be part of the fraternal order police bargaining unit as opposed to this IBEW unit. So that's the only change. The same rest of it is the same. So I don't know if you want me to go over everything again, I can, but yeah, it's
Not necessary, but thank you.
yeah.
So you just need a motion.
Well, I guess any public comment.
Any public comment on the union contract for clerical workers?
Just to clarify why Emily's in a separate union, because her work is completely different than the work they do over here. And she has different certifications than they have over here. And she's a lone worker, so she does not get a break, lunch break, or a break because we can't close our doors. So she would be the only person to fulfill that position. So that's why we're separated, or she's separated.
Kind of the same reason why the clerical is in now their own unit as opposed to our linemen, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
So this agreement will go into effect June 1st. And with that comes the change of city hall hours from 8:30 to 4:30 with staff lunches going from an hour to a half hour. So that's a part of this agreement.
I would make the motion to approve as presented.
John Leo,
Yes.
Matt Bagheera,
Yes.
Nancy Rundell.
Yes.
Amy Melky.
Yes.
Motion carried.
And item G, which you do not have on information in your packet, but it is on the agenda. It's, well, you know what? Let me go through the city manager report before we go to item G. Sorry, that way people don't miss out on some updates.
On your thrilling city manager.
Exciting stuff there. The police department has received 3 applications, right, for the marine enforcement officer position, the summer part-time temporary seasonal position in the summer. So they'll begin those interviews soon. This week. We've hired a part-time IT consultant located in Harbor Springs up to 5 hours per week to further assist the city with IT needs and issues. Yeah, that's gonna be helpful. He's already been a big help in a couple weeks he's been here, so it's awesome. We're also contracting with an IT firm to do a security risk and vulnerabilities and gap assessment of our IT system. This will be completed sometime in May. They'll work with our current IT contractor as well as this new one that we just hired to look at those gaps and potential risks in our IT infrastructure and then try to address those, create a plan to address those. Arbor Fest is Saturday, May 27th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Kiwanis Park. It's gonna be fun this year. The tree board has a lot of fun activities planned. Tree pruning demonstration, scavenger hunt, nature art demonstration. There'll be free seedlings, free food, tree talk. There's a lot going on. So it's gonna be, it was a fun event last year. It was great weather. So if you guys pass the word and come out, it'll be fun. Finally, the council, planning commission, the PDA and the chamber will be holding a joint meeting on economic development at the Holy Childhood Community Center on Monday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. It's a formal meeting, but it's going to be more like a forum, a conversation between the board members and the public to talk about our economic development goals, how to address them, and then any other economic development issues in the city. So Bill Mulder, who's here, will be moderating that event. He still doesn't know what he has to do, so I'm gonna meet up with him, tell him what he has to do. But we're looking forward to that. It's gonna be great to have different boards come together at a different venue other than City Hall, as well as including the chamber on that too. Standard social media statistics, and I'll get really quickly to our boards and commissions. The Parks Board met on April 18th, talked about, recap their Easter egg hunt event, what went well and what they would like to add for the following event next year. They shared ideas about Jean Jardine Park and Zoll Street Beach, and they reviewed the Parks Plan project matrix. April 20th, obviously, you know, the Planning Commission finalized their short-term rental recommendations to council. They approved 2 applications. One was a special land use, another was a site plan. They both essentially dealt with accessory buildings. And finally, April 21st, the tree board met and they finalized Arbor Fest details and discussed upcoming tree plan goals to work on. Some meetings, April 19th, the NPPA Long-Term Power Supply Subcommittee had a virtual meeting. The CCE 911 monthly meeting in Petoskey. I don't often get in details here about the CCE 911. It's a lot of emergency information, but one constant thing that's been going on for several years now is they've been short-staffed. They've been, you know, they're supposed to have 17, 18 employees. They've been verging between 12 and 13. So big topic of conversation for the past several months there is how do we get more dispatchers to work there? And it's hard, like other businesses and for-profit, nonprofit, it's hard to find employees. So that's just one thing that's been reoccurring there. And finally, we had a informational meeting with the State Historical Preservation Office to learn more about historic districts and programs, as that's been brought up before. So just an informational meeting, just to know more what that's about. And then on personal note, my wife is expecting May 31st. So May 15th will be my last scheduled council meeting. I will be probably the month of June, just only working very lightly. So Nick will take over one council meeting.
You'll be working.
Yeah. So expect a lighter June agendas if we can help it. We'll probably expect a heavy May 15th agenda. So.
If I'm in charge, we might even cancel a couple.
All right, now we can go to item, unless there are any questions about operations. No? Item G is a request by a property owner on 231 East Bluff Street to essentially exchange some property that she owns for burial of utility services. So since this is a real estate discussion, we're going to ask Jim Raymer to go into closed session. But however, I believe Betty Davis has a representative here. Kathy, if she wants just to explain more, talk more about the request.
Sure, closed session or not? Just-
Oh, you can do it right here, right, Jim? That should be fine.
What's that?
To explain the request. Right
Sure.
now. Yeah, in open session is fine. Okay.
Okay, what it is, she owns 321 East Bluff. She also owns the property across the street, which the boardwalk is built on. And she's been paying taxes on the property across the street. The boardwalk has been total use of that property, and she doesn't know about her liabilities. And all she would like to have is that along the bluff, the power lines are buried probably, I don't know the percentage, but quite a few of the houses in front of the bluff. And there's just a couple left, and hers is one of them. So she'd like to exchange that property below the bluff or below Bluff Drive and give it to the city or exchange it to the city to bury those lines. Apparently the lines are already in the ground there and could be found and connected. And there's just one pole right in front of her window, but she'd like to see that buried.
There's
about as clear as I can make it.
Yeah, the utility situation is a little more complex than that. I did have Lucas go out there and look at it. Probably we need to bury a couple more poles, but that is essentially the request that's being made as an exchange of burial of utility lines for.
Yeah, and she'd like to know her liability, because what if somebody falls on the boardwalk? She owns that property and is paying taxes on it, and she doesn't know if she's covered.
Jim?
At some time in the past, the city did adopt a resolution committing to indemnify any property owner over whose property the boardwalk ran from any liability arising from use of the boardwalk. So that was done some years ago. I don't know exactly when, but we did find it. But for, and that may not address Betty's total concerns, but there was an effort to do that, to protect her in that situation. So, but I understand that she's concerned maybe about longer term issues, so.
Oh, sure, taxes and trimming rights and, liability, all those things are real concerns.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're going to address that and would like me to stay for that, or how you'd like me.
I think we just will go in closed session and council will talk about the main focus, which is the real estate exchange, and
Okay.
talk about that. And then what I'll do is I'll contact you and Betty afterwards, depending on what,
Yeah, she's a little under the weather right now.
I
so-
know, I heard that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thank you for being here and talking.
Pardon?
Thank you for being here and talking on me.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So with that, Jim, do you have language that a council member would need?
If the council was inclined to go into closed session, we would need a motion to meet in closed session under section 8D of the Michigan Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase of real property up to the time an option to purchase or lease that real property is obtained.
I will make said motion.
Answer Rondell.
Yes.
Matt Bagheera. John Leo.
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Closed session at 8:46.
Thank you all for coming.
Hey, Jeff, what did you say?
Oh,